Imagine trusting someone with your entire heart, your future, your very soul, only to have them use that trust as a weapon to destroy everything you've ever worked for. This is the story of Ethan Rodriguez, a man whose life was shattered by 5 words. He assaulted me last night. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about truth, justice, and the devastating power of a perfectly crafted lie. For 10 years, Ethan lived in a nightmare created by the woman he once loved more than life itself. But what happened when the truth finally surfaced? Well, that's a story of justice, so poetic, so perfectly timed, that it almost seems too incredible to be real. But every single word of what I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you watching right now. Your support is what makes Crime Vault possible, and it means everything to us. If you're new here, welcome to our community where we uncover the most shocking true stories that mainstream media won't tell you. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, but it's the biggest way you can support our mission to bring you these untold stories of justice, betrayal, and redemption. Now let's get back to Ethan's story, because what happened to this man will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the justice system. Portland, Oregon, 2011. Ethan Rodriguez was living what most people would call the American dream. At 29, he owned a thriving digital marketing agency, had just bought his first house, and was deeply in love with a woman named Isabella Chen. Isabella worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative and seemed to be everything Ethan had ever wanted in a partner. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and according to Ethan, the connection was immediate and electric. Within 6 months, Isabella had moved into his house. Within a year, they were talking about marriage and children. For 3 beautiful years, Ethan believed he had found his soulmate. But Isabella Chen was harboring a secret that would soon turn Ethan's fairy tale into his worst nightmare. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Ethan discovered the truth. He had come home early from work, hoping to surprise Isabella with dinner reservations at their favorite restaurant. Instead, he found text messages on her phone that revealed she had been having an affair with her district manager for over 8 months. When Ethan confronted Isabella that night, her reaction was unlike anything he had ever seen from her before. The warm, loving woman he knew disappeared, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and filled with rage. She didn't deny the affair. Instead, she looked at him with eyes full of hatred and said something that should have been a warning. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." 3 days later, Isabella moved out. Ethan thought the worst was behind him. He was heartbroken, yes, but ready to move on with his life. He had no idea that Isabella Chen was about to unleash a carefully orchestrated plan that would destroy everything he had ever worked for. On a quiet Sunday morning, exactly 1 week after Isabella had moved out, Ethan was awakened by loud knocking on his front door. When he opened it, he found 2 detectives with a warrant for his arrest. The charges? Sexual assault in the 1st degree. Ethan's first reaction was laughter. Surely this was some kind of mistake, some administrative error that would be cleared up within hours. But as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists and he was read his rights, the horrible reality began to sink in. Isabella had filed a detailed police report claiming that Ethan had sexually assaulted her during their final confrontation about the affair. The accusations were specific, graphic, and devastating. Isabella claimed that when she tried to leave that Tuesday night, Ethan had become violent, pinning her down and assaulting her as punishment for her infidelity. She had photographs of bruises, medical records from a hospital visit, and witness statements from 3 of her closest friends who swore she had called them in tears that very night. Within 24 hours of his arrest, Ethan's entire world collapsed like a house of cards. His business partners immediately suspended him from the company. Clients began canceling contracts. His face appeared on local news broadcasts with the caption, "Local business owner charged with sexual assault." The court of public opinion had already reached its verdict, and Ethan Rodriguez was guilty. But the legal nightmare was just beginning. The prosecution's case against Ethan Rodriguez seemed airtight. Isabella Chen wasn't just a scorned ex-girlfriend making wild accusations. She was a credible witness with compelling evidence and a story that made perfect sense to everyone who heard it. The prosecutor, Amanda Sullivan, painted a picture of a controlling, abusive man who couldn't handle rejection. According to the prosecution's narrative, Ethan had been psychologically abusing Isabella for months, isolating her from friends and family, monitoring her communications, and becoming increasingly possessive and violent. Isabella's testimony was devastating. She took the stand for 3 hours, describing in graphic detail how Ethan had supposedly attacked her. She cried at all the right moments, her voice breaking as she recounted the alleged assault. She spoke about living in fear, about feeling trapped in a relationship with a man who she claimed had threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave. The evidence seemed overwhelming. There were the photographs of bruises on Isabella's arms and neck. There was a recorded phone call to her sister immediately after the alleged assault, where Isabella could be heard crying and whispering that she was scared for her life. There were medical records from the emergency room visit she made the next morning. There were witness statements from friends who testified that Isabella had confided in them about Ethan's alleged abuse for weeks before the incident. Ethan's defense attorney, Patricia Hawkins, fought valiantly, but seemed to be swimming against an impossible tide. How do you prove that something didn't happen when the alleged victim has such compelling evidence that it did? Ethan himself took the stand in his own defense, something his lawyer had advised against. For 4 hours he maintained his innocence, explaining that he had never laid a hand on Isabella, that their final argument had been heated but entirely verbal, and that he had no idea why she would make such horrific accusations against him. But under cross-examination, the prosecutor tore him apart. Why had he never mentioned Isabella's alleged affair during his initial police interview? Why had he immediately hired a lawyer instead of cooperating fully with the investigation? Why had he deleted text messages from his phone if he had nothing to hide? Every answer Ethan gave seemed to dig his hole deeper. To the jury, he looked like exactly what the prosecutor said he was, a guilty man desperately trying to lie his way out of the consequences of his actions. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Ethan Rodriguez was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. As the bailiff placed the handcuffs on his wrists, Ethan caught sight of Isabella in the gallery. She was crying, surrounded by supporters who praised her courage for coming forward. In that moment, Ethan realized that he wasn't just going to prison for a crime he didn't commit. He was going to prison while his accuser was being celebrated as a hero. Prison is a dangerous place for anyone, but it's especially hellish for someone convicted of sexual assault. Other inmates have their own twisted sense of justice, and they don't much care whether you're actually guilty or not. The conviction is enough. For 7 years, Ethan lived in constant fear. He was attacked twice, once with a sharpened toothbrush that left him with permanent scars on his back, and once by a group of inmates who beat him so severely that he spent 3 weeks in the prison hospital. But perhaps the worst torture was the psychological one. Every day, Ethan woke up knowing that somewhere in the outside world, Isabella Chen was living her best life while he rotted in a cell for a crime that existed only in her imagination. Through letters from his family, Ethan learned that Isabella had become something of a local celebrity. She spoke at domestic violence awareness events, gave interviews to newspapers and podcasts, and had even started a nonprofit organization for assault survivors. She was literally profiting from the lie that had destroyed his life, and everyone was calling her an inspiration. Ethan Rodriguez served every single day of his 7-year sentence. No early parole, no time off for good behavior. The nature of his conviction made sure of that. When he walked out of those prison gates in 2019, he was 36 years old and faced a world that wanted nothing to do with him. As a registered sex offender, finding housing was nearly impossible. Finding employment was even harder. Ethan ended up in a halfway house in Seattle, washing dishes at a 24-hour diner for minimum wage, and trying to figure out how to rebuild a life from absolutely nothing. But prison had changed Ethan Rodriguez in ways that would soon prove crucial. 7 years of having every aspect of his life controlled by others had taught him patience. 7 years of being surrounded by criminals had taught him how to think like an investigator. And 7 years of burning rage had taught him the value of channeling that anger into something productive. During his final 2 years in prison, Ethan had spent every free hour in the law library, studying legal procedures, investigation techniques, and case law. He taught himself private investigation skills through correspondence courses and books donated to the prison library. By the time he was released, Ethan Rodriguez had effectively given himself a master class in criminal investigation. For the first year of his freedom, Ethan focused simply on survival. He worked, he attended his mandatory counseling sessions, and he slowly began the process of learning how to live in the world again. But he was also watching Isabella Chen, who had no idea that the man she had destroyed was now free and quietly rebuilding his life. Isabella's public profile had only grown during Ethan's incarceration. She had written a book about her experience called Finding My Voice, A Survivor's Journey, which had become a regional bestseller. She gave regular talks at universities and conferences. She had even been featured in a documentary about domestic violence survivors. But as Ethan began studying Isabella's public statements more carefully, he started noticing something interesting: inconsistencies, small details in her various interviews and speeches that didn't quite match up with her original testimony, references to events that contradicted the timeline she had established at trial. Most people would never notice these discrepancies, but Ethan had memorized every word of that trial transcript. The breakthrough came in early 2020, when Ethan discovered something that Isabella had apparently forgotten about: social media posts from the time period when she claimed to be living in fear of him. Hidden in the depths of Isabella's Instagram account were photos and captions from the months leading up to their breakup, Photos of her and Ethan together at restaurants, at parties, on vacation. Captions talking about how happy and grateful she felt, how blessed she was to have such a loving partner. Post after post that directly contradicted the narrative of abuse and fear she had presented at trial. But Ethan knew that social media posts alone wouldn't be enough to overturn his conviction. He needed something bigger, something that would definitively prove Isabella had committed perjury, and that's when he decided to reach out to someone who might hold the key to everything: Isabella's former best friend, Monica Santos. Monica had been one of the key witnesses against Ethan at trial. She had testified that Isabella had called her in tears the night of the alleged assault, begging for help and confessing her fear of Ethan's violence. Her testimony had been crucial in establishing the prosecution's timeline. Finding Monica wasn't easy. She had gotten married, moved to Phoenix, and changed her name to Monica Walsh. But Ethan's newly acquired investigation skills eventually led him to her address. What happened next would change everything. When Ethan called Monica and explained who he was, her reaction was immediate and telling. She didn't hang up. She didn't threaten to call the police. Instead, she began crying and said 4 words that would echo in Ethan's mind for months. "I've been waiting for this call." Monica agreed to meet with Ethan at a coffee shop in Phoenix. What she told him during that 3-hour conversation would finally give him the ammunition he needed to fight back. Monica revealed that Isabella had asked her to lie, not just to embellish the truth or to leave out certain details, but to completely fabricate her testimony. Isabella had called Monica the night after her confrontation with Ethan, not in tears of fear, but in a rage of vindictive fury. She had explicitly told Monica that she was going to make Ethan pay for humiliating her, and that she needed Monica's help to make her story believable. Monica had been terrified to refuse. Isabella had threatened to destroy her career and her relationships if she didn't cooperate. So Monica had gone along with the lie, convincing herself that surely the truth would come out at trial, and she wouldn't actually have to go through with the deception. But when trial time came, Monica found herself trapped by her own previous statements to police. She testified falsely, and the guilt had been eating her alive for 8 years. Monica wasn't the only one. As Ethan dug deeper, he discovered that Isabella had coerced multiple witnesses into supporting her false narrative. She had fabricated evidence, coached testimony, and orchestrated an elaborate deception that had fooled everyone from the police to the prosecutors to the jury. Armed with Monica's confession and months of his own meticulous investigation, Ethan Rodriguez finally felt ready to take on the system that had wrongfully convicted him. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. Ethan's first stop was the Innocence Project, but his case didn't meet their criteria. He wasn't facing the death penalty, and DNA evidence wasn't relevant to his situation. However, they referred him to a lawyer named Robert Chen, no relation to Isabella, who specialized in wrongful conviction cases. When Ethan presented his evidence to Robert, the attorney was stunned. In 20 years of practicing law, he had never seen such a comprehensive case of prosecutorial deception assembled by the victim himself. Ethan had essentially done the work of an entire investigative team. Robert took the case immediately, and pro bono. Together, they spent 6 months building an airtight case, not just for Ethan's exoneration, but for criminal charges against Isabella Chen. In November 2020, nearly 10 years after his original arrest, Ethan Rodriguez walked into a Portland courthouse, this time as a petitioner seeking justice, not as a defendant facing destruction. The hearing to overturn Ethan's conviction was unlike anything the courthouse had seen in years. Media attention was intense, with reporters from across the country covering the story of the man who had spent 7 years in prison for a crime that never happened. Monica Santos testified via video link from Phoenix, breaking down in tears as she described how Isabella had manipulated her into perjury. Other witnesses came forward with similar stories, people who had been too afraid to speak up before, but were now ready to tell the truth about Isabella's campaign of deception. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded phone calls where Isabella could be heard coaching witnesses, social media posts that contradicted her testimony, medical records that had been altered, financial records showing that Isabella had paid money to at least one witness in exchange for false testimony. When Judge Patricia Morrison announced that Ethan's conviction was being overturned and all charges dismissed, the courtroom erupted in applause. But Ethan himself barely reacted. 7 years in prison had taught him not to trust the system until he saw concrete results. The real satisfaction came 2 hours later, when Isabella Chen was arrested at her office on charges of perjury, filing false police reports, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The woman who had destroyed Ethan's life was now facing serious prison time herself. Isabella's arrest made national news. The same media outlets that had once celebrated her as a courageous survivor were now dissecting her web of lies. Her book was pulled from shelves. Her speaking engagements were canceled. Her nonprofit organization was dissolved. The career she had built on Ethan's destruction crumbled in a matter of days. But Isabella Chen wasn't going down without a fight. Despite overwhelming evidence of her guilt, she refused plea deal after plea deal, maintaining her innocence and claiming that Ethan had somehow fabricated all the evidence against her. Her decision to go to trial was catastrophic. The prosecution presented a case so compelling that the jury convicted Isabella on all counts in just 90 minutes, even faster than Ethan's original conviction. Judge Morrison sentenced Isabella to 9 years in state prison and ordered her to pay Ethan $3.2 million in restitution. 9 years, 2 years more than Ethan had served for a crime he didn't commit. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that courtroom. Today, Ethan Rodriguez runs one of the most successful private investigation firms on the West Coast, specializing in wrongful conviction cases and forensic evidence analysis. He has helped exonerate 18 people who were wrongfully convicted and is currently working on dozens more cases across the country. But the victory came at a price that can never be fully calculated. Ethan lost 9 years of his life from age 29 to 38, what should have been some of the best years of his life. He lost career opportunities, relationships, and the chance to start a family. He lost his faith in the justice system, and the $3.2 million settlement helped him rebuild financially, but no amount of money can restore what was taken from him. The years in prison left him with PTSD, chronic anxiety, and physical scars that will never fade. Isabella Chen is currently serving her sentence at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Oregon. She'll be eligible for parole in 2027. According to prison sources, she continues to maintain her innocence and has never expressed any remorse for what she did to Ethan. The ripple effects of Isabel's lies extended far beyond just Ethan's life. Monica Santos attempted suicide twice during the years she carried the guilt of her false testimony. Several other witnesses suffered severe depression and anxiety from their participation in the deception. The case damaged public trust in the justice system and made it harder for real assault victims to be believed. Ethan's story raises uncomfortable questions about our legal system and our society's approach to these types of accusations. How many other innocent people are sitting in prison cells because someone was skilled enough to weaponize the justice system against them? How many real victims are not believed because of cases like this one? But perhaps most importantly, Ethan's story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the ultimate victory of truth over lies. It took 10 years, but justice finally prevailed. As Ethan himself says, the truth doesn't have an expiration date. It might get buried, it might get twisted, it might seem impossible to prove, but if you're innocent and you never give up, the truth will eventually find a way to surface. Sometimes that's the only thing that keeps you going. The knowledge that somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be discovered. That was the incredible true story of Ethan Rodriguez, a man who lost everything to a lie but who never stopped fighting for the truth. It's a story that reminds us that our justice system, for all its safeguards, is only as reliable as the people who operate it. And sometimes those people can be deceived by someone skilled enough to manipulate the truth. What did you think of Ethan's story? Have you ever been in a situation where you knew the truth but couldn't prove it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your perspectives help shape future episodes. If this story moved you, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Here at Crime Vault, we're committed to bringing you the most compelling true crime stories, told with the respect and attention they deserve. Your subscription helps us continue investigating and sharing these important stories. We have dozens more cases like this one, stories of injustice, perseverance, and ultimate redemption. Stories that the mainstream media won't tell you because they're too complex, too uncomfortable, or too controversial. Until next time, remember, the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes. This has been Crime Vault. Thank you for watching.